The next 72 hours will bring us volatility more than what we can handle. It started off with Scott Bessent showing us an economic D-Day and what America can do, but no one really took that seriously. And then with the upcoming PCE data in the next couple of hours, Jackson Hole, where Kevin Warsh speaks and how he's going to be setting the tone for rates moving forwards, further oil discussions between America, Iran, and most importantly, Nvidia's earnings that are going to tell us whether we're about to go to a nuclear wasteland type apocalypse or whether we keep pushing forward in the S&P 500. A lot of fun things to discuss today, including bonds, crypto price action, and recent developments as to what other countries are doing to support them. So tune in and we'll get you all the updates.
Let's go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strategic Markets, your place for technical and fundamental analysis all at once across many markets. Now, into our midweek session, we are starting off with the really scary economic D-Day. You guys might have heard of it. You would have seen that America is looking to impose sanctions, and they're obviously going to sanction Iran very hard. Basically, what they came out with was to basically punish Iran's ability to transact for oil, even in terms of crypto, and they're trying to get to policing that and restricting that the best way that they can, and they impose some other sanctions as well. But most importantly, I think one of the threats that they made was that any other countries assisting them with regards to transacting and getting financial power while they are at war with the US could be at risk of being de-dollarized, which means that they cannot participate in the global reserve currency of the US dollar. Now, that may sound like a threat, and that may be bad for the country that needs the US dollar, but ultimately it's way more worse for America itself because it loses global reserve dominance, right? And when we take that into consideration, statements that he made, if people don't want to meet our expectations, then they should expect to leave the dollar system. And then followed up with, why would I want to blow up the global financial system? That is the real truth. Like when you go ahead and follow through with actions like that, you are actually looking to explode the global financial system. And that's why I don't think a lot of people are really buying this or they're really scared because they're not saying they have imposed this. They're saying they might or can or they will impose this. And this is why it's really not that scary because China, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, they have already formed a economy known as the BRICS. And they're basically saying, okay, de-dollarize the world, lose your dominance, push us hard, and we'll just go on our own rails of economy. So a very interesting day. Some more upcoming news over the next couple of hours. You will see that the US PCE data will be released today with expectations around 3.6%. Now, if it is at 3.6, then we can expect a bit of a slight pump and then probably sideways. If it's less than 3.6, then it will most likely have a more decent pump and the rate hike odds will go down even more because it's at a good position. And if PCE is greater than 3.6%,
Mhm.
then there most likely will be a dump and rate hike odds will rise, which means the next aspect that Kevin Warsh has to speak at the Jackson Hole conference on Friday. And this is where he's basically going to be giving us a bit of a macro viewpoint towards cutting or keeping the rates exactly where they are or being a little bit more hawkish about raising rates, right? So a lot of people are going to be tuning in to see what he has to say regarding the American economy. So the PCE data will most likely flow onto this particular conversation on Friday. So like I said, a very heavy 72 hours that are coming in for the market. On top of that, when we add in the America-Iran crisis, which obviously has been playing a big impact, we can see over here today oil did crash over 5% because reports had emerged that Iran and Oman are now targeting a permanent Strait of Hormuz shipping route within 60 days to actually let ships pass through because they are trying because there's been reports that US and Iran have reached a ceasefire for a reasonable short time frame. The US has said that there's no ongoing negotiations with Iran, but obviously there's multiple sources involved saying different things, and that has had a price action effect. You can see over here that on the week we were trailing around the $95 mark, but we have dropped significantly, especially on this particular day, which was a 5% move. So this is definitely interesting to watch and see as we are forming this little triangular pattern towards the sideways price action. But whether it breaks down from here or keeps coiling a little bit more before deciding to break upwards or downwards will be very interesting to see. But yeah, for now, all these news events, which honestly I just believe is a little bit of a boo hockey, but at the end of the day, it is having some impact. So we are seeing that particularly play in the price action. But this is the real news event that a lot of people are waiting for the markets, because this is what could drive that little apocalypse for us or continued strength in the American markets. And that is Nvidia's earnings that are coming out tomorrow. And if Nvidia's earnings come out and they end up being bad or less than expectations, then expect S&P 500 to definitely have a negative impact. But if they meet expectations or more likely proceed, which they have been doing for the last couple of months, then I can see the S&P 500 touching this red line again, and we just having a little bit of a berserk opportunity of going higher from this red line, having a more bubble aspect, or just coming towards this red line and just keep trying to test against it. So that will be interesting to see too, because the S&P 500, like I've been discussing, has just been trailing in this upwards range for a very long time now. So let's see how that goes. And yes, that's why also the next 72 hours make it very critical. What else have we been focusing on that's been pushing the market recently is bond markets. And right now, particularly, bond markets and interest rates go hand in hand. And the Bank of Japan is looking to raise rates to a minimum of 1.5% in Q1 2027. So the narrow majority of the economists forecasted up to 1.25% in a prior survey. Now we're going higher. So it is looking like, the rates function for debt is definitely going up, especially in the Japan markets. That has an influence in the American economy as well. And
Yeah.
I've got our 10-year bond yield futures over here, and you can see recently with the news events that's coming through, like this was just going up because everyone was just like losing faith in the debt market. But I guess with America now creating short-term debt to buy their long-term debt, for somehow it is stabilizing the debt market a little bit.
Mhm.
So like we discussed in the last video, it's like using a credit card to pay off your mortgage, which is honestly one of the worst things you could possibly do. But they're a government, so they can do that. So why not? I don't know why not, but you get what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it has looked like that there's some stabilization on the daily chart. When the money starts flowing through as of the first week of September, it will be very interesting to see whether this starts going down, the bond yields and the price of bonds start going back up. So we'll get some coverage on that from Steve as well later onwards for his thoughts.
Yeah,
But
maybe it's having an effect. We'll see how it does go, but whether it's actually going to have a sustained effect, that will be the question.
agreed. Now, Japan has also targeted a 24/7 instant settlement of stocks and government bonds via blockchain infrastructure. And this is great for all the crypto followers. Now, you can see over here, this is a perfect segue to move on to Bitcoin, the initial blockchain infrastructure. And this is a little bit of an interesting squiggly situation I've built, because we've been discussing about this descending wedge pattern for a very long time. But I also thought I would draw this possible chart pattern of a inverse head and shoulders. And this could play out depending on a couple of instances, right? Now, there's two resistance plot points that I have over here at about 78,000 and 82,000. I personally can't see us ranging around in this particular area for the next 1 to 2 weeks if we do break above it, before deciding our next direction, which I know is hilarious, but could be up, sideways, or downwards, right? And generally, if I think we're going to go sideways in this particular range, then likely we build support and we have a good reason to continue upwards. But if we don't break above this and stay in this range, and then we just keep going sideways, it's a very likely opportunity that we go down from here. Okay. And if we go down, then we can go and test towards this inverse head and shoulders pattern. And then inverse head and shoulders patterns generally play towards the upside. So that could be interesting to see. And then we could possibly have a range move upwards as well. But If the inverse head and shoulders fails, this is extremely bad scenarios. The American economy absolutely crashes, for example. Then in that case, yes, we could see a temporary downside, possibly making new lows, and that's where the people who believe in the 4-year cycle and October being the bottom low, this is how it could possibly play out. And I'm not saying that's totally out of the cards, but if I had to put, if I had to be a bit of a betting man, I would say there's a reasonable, like, I'd say 45% chance that we go upwards in this direction. From my own personal expertise, not financial advice, of course, I'd say then we have a 35% chance that we possibly form this inverse head and shoulders pattern. And I'd be comfortable with that because, that's fine. We're still making higher highs. But the other 20% I could see ourselves going down. I personally don't really see ourselves setting new lows for this particular year. I think the market has caught everyone astray and gotten everyone who was really fearful left outside the market. So this is the way the revenge trade could occur, and people would start buying back because they're like not going to wait for October and they're just going to go now. And this is where I could see the price break up higher from a market psychology perspective. But I'm always open to downside possibility, and that's where I can see that particularly play out. So keep on check with it, see how the markets go. And another great thing about Bitcoin, if we close this particular monthly chart in the next 5 trading days, this would be really good at this particular range because for our 14-year trend line, as you can see over here, right now on the month, we are above the trend line and we are strongly above the trend line. So if we stay around this price action of 78, 79,000, this will be so good to be back in the range. And then I believe there'll be even more renewed optimism for the markets itself. So let's see how that progresses over the next couple of days. Another interesting news, Thailand's SEC released draft rules for spot Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs to trade on their stock exchange. So this is really good. You just have another country adopting. America's already joined the way. So many other countries have. Might as well be Thailand as well. And on that news, covering crypto, we always talk about Ethereum. Ethereum has just been doing reasonably well too. It's obviously had this upwards price movement, but now it's just ranging sideways as well, possibly forming a bit of a bull flag or, just a triangle to the sideways before it's deciding a range direction, which also, again, I'm unlikely believe that we move upwards over here. To a lot of people thinking $3,200 is the next price level because that's the next resistance line. I'm open to, seeing us possibly test if we have a strong breakout on Bitcoin that we could possibly go towards the $3,000 level from here onwards, or, safely at least the 2,800 level before going towards 3,000. So keep that in mind. Because Ethereum BTC is also forming this bull flag. And that's where I could see that if we go towards touching this resistance line after this bull flag breaks out to the 0.34 level, that's where Ethereum in the US dollar denomination could start hitting that $2,800, $3,000 levels. So it could be a really exciting next week or two for us to witness. But on that, I'll pass it over to Steve for his technicals.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that, Yash. So let's start having a look with the TLT to begin with. So taking a look at the bonds aspect. When we have a look at this area, you can essentially see, like from what Yash was actually mentioning from before in terms of the effects in relation to the bonds market, we have actually had a movement upwards. So looking over the right-hand side first, we were starting to see some potential move with what was going on with the bond buyback announcement back in Wednesday of last week. So with that particular move, there was some slight aspect there when we actually were moving up above the short-term moving averages, but we did have a retracement back straight away at the end of last week. What's happened since then, in terms of the beginning of this week, is we've actually had another test of those short-term moving averages moving back upwards. And interestingly enough, we actually now are trading above that quarterly VWAP we were discussing over the weekend. So with that, we've actually had quite a strong movement overnight. We have to remember we're recording this at this point in time about 8:45 a.m. New York time. So we've actually got the US markets about to open over in New York at 9:30. So at this particular point in time, only a slight move downwards at this moment in relation to the bonds, but still above that quarterly VWAP at this point, as you can see in terms of the pre-market, about to open around about $83.26 in terms of the TLT. So in relation to all of this, still above that quarterly VWAP. So in terms of those who have actually purchased at any time in this particular quarter, they're pretty much slightly in control to those who have actually purchased at any time during the actual quarter in itself there. So not so bad in relation to all of that, but is it going to actually maintain itself? Okay, we're above all the short-term moving averages, but below a lot of the other major moving averages is the other side of the coin. Also well below the yearly VWAP, that's the big thing. But it is setting up and forming some foundations. And on top of the things overall as well, we are talking about some major fundamental shifts that are going on as well in terms of these buybacks that are going on. The biggest thing as well to really consider is we actually have had about 5 trading days, or 4 of those 5 trading days, actually trading above this Tenkan-Sen blue line. I'm going to take a look over the left-hand side here. And we are now forming higher highs and higher lows in relation to the lagging indicator being that green line over here. So we are starting to see some new green shoots, if you want to call it that, in terms of movement in the upward direction in terms of the bonds. And this is now actually being shown in terms of some weakness in terms of the interest rates. So like Yash was actually mentioning in his presentation as well, we are basically seeing some of these interest rates now coming downwards and now probably about to actually come down to test the 50-day moving average. So if we take a look at that right-hand side, you can see that with that blue line there. So things are actually starting to ease a little bit. So we were actually surmising before that perhaps these buybacks are actually starting to now have a bit of an effect in relation to things. Let's see whether that's going to be sustainable or not when these buybacks come into effect. I think it was the 9th of September, if memory serves me right, when they actually do start to come into effect. That's still about a week and a half, 2 weeks away. Let's see exactly what happens at that stage as to whether or not these rates, in terms of 10-year rates in particular, really do continue to come down, perhaps even come down to test the 100-day moving average, for instance, and whether or not the TLT, being the bonds, actually do rise up enough to, say, maybe even start testing the 100-day moving average and testing the September lows again. Then we'll really see whether or not the bonds themselves are actually going to have a major impact, and whether that flows into the indices, in particular the Russell. And as we know, the Russells are very, very sensitive in relation to the bonds as well in terms of interest rates, because they actually have large amounts of borrowing in relation to the interest rates as well too. So let's see how things are going there. Now, overall, since we've been speaking on the weekend, not much has been going on in terms of the indices. They've just basically been tracking sideways, waiting for the Nvidia action more than anything else in terms of earnings that are coming out later on today, being Wednesday. So as you can see, the SPY, not much action. The Qs, not much action at all since the weekend either. Same type of situation with the Dow, not much action going on there. The Russell, likewise. So everything's really just been sitting along, doing virtually nothing overall for pretty much the whole weekend. The TLT's been the only major real basic mover with everything that's going on. The same in the precious metal space. Gold doing very, very little overall since the weekend as well. Silver, pretty much the same. So everything's pretty much just been sitting sideways, doing nothing. We were expecting no real movement in silver, even over from the weekend's discussion as well too. Why, you might say? Well, we were tracking pretty much along this 100-day moving average at that point. You can go back to that video as well and have a look at that. We were saying exactly that. Is more than likely going to be going sideways because of this 100-day moving average. As we're testing, we'll be bouncing up and down around that particular thing there, and that will probably even be dragging gold down at that particular point in time, or even just stabilizing gold at that stage. That's exactly what's going on. In terms of copper itself has probably been the only big mover in relation to anything over the last few days, and that's actually been going up, but not really enough to be able to really do much at all at this point. Iron ore, have a quick look at that. That really hasn't been doing much at all either, constrained, if anything, by the quarterly VWAP. So really not much has been going on in relation to anything else in the market overall. If we take a look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, covering on from what Yash was basically saying a few moments ago as well too, that's even been a little bit constrained more than anything. It looked as though that's actually come back up and tested, what's that up there, 81,200. but even that's come back a little bit in relation to things from being up there at that point, and even since the weekend as well. Basically, from Sunday, that got as high as 78,000, and we're pretty much right there still at this point to the 78,000 as well, right now at this moment. Ethereum, pretty much the same. Ethereum on Sunday got as high as 2,480, and we're currently at 2,450. So really nothing going on there as well too. If anything, Ethereum might be the dragging anchor at this point in time, dragging it back to its prior support level from back in January 2022. So not really much going on there whatsoever. We're all just basically just sitting here on our hands, waiting for the Nvidia earnings to come through later on at the end of the day. And on top of that, probably even everything else waiting in terms of other reaction there as well towards everything else towards the end of the week as well. So watch for Nvidia at the end of the day. Watch for the reaction to the reaction, and then the reaction to the reaction as well, and also whatever else happens over in Jackson Hole at the end of the week as well too. So we could get a bit of a pickup in terms of further activity towards the end of the week. Also wait to see whatever comes out in terms of all the discussions from Jackson Hole. There could be a pickup in volume that will actually happen after everyone at least has a bit more certainty as to how the market is reacting to the overall earnings situation, and also to see how everyone's reacting in terms of the economic aspects as well. Once there's a bit more of that certainty and everyone knows which way the market is actually going, then people will probably have that ability to say, okay, well, it's going up or it's going down, or perhaps even not doing any action whatsoever. Once all of that certainty is actually a bit more printed into the market as well too. And then from there, we'll know exactly what's going on. But once more volume is actually into the market, we'll have some direction as to what's actually happening. Other than that, we'll know exactly where we're actually sitting, and then we can be able to have a bit more direction, and we'll figure it out what's going on towards the end of the week. But with that, I'll pass it right back over to you, mate, and you can go on with the concluding remarks.
Thanks, Steve. And yes, like we said, the next 72 hours can be really volatile, and those news events are definitely going to drive the market in crazy ways. So, nothing much more, to be honest, as compared to just the influences that they might have. And like Steve said, it either goes up, down, or sideways. So, you'll never know
Exactly.
for sure. But if you've liked the update today, just regarding the fundamentals that might influence us and how the technical support is, please drop us a like. It definitely goes a long way. If there's anything you like or anything we could do differently, put that down in the comments. We will go through every comment that we can to keep you guys engaged.
We had Mark, and we also had a new commenter as well coming through. We had a really nice comment coming through too. It was really lovely.
Thank you, Mark, for your ongoing support, and to one of our new specials, Zaharoon, our official. Thank you also. We appreciated your comments,
It was
and
lovely.
it was
Thank
a
you.
fairly positive one too.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, if you put a comment down, we will give you a shout out on our next video until we start getting more than 5 comments. So, with that being said, put that down and you'll get a shout out from us. But if you have been enjoying the journey and you've been enjoying the little humor as well as the technical analysis that goes into this, please do drop subscribe and jump along the journey with us. But on that, we want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you at the end of the week.
Thank you very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the trading week and enjoy potential fireworks in relation to Nvidia as well as everything else that comes out in terms of earnings at the end of the day. Take
Or
care.
an apocalypse.
Have a fantastic trading into the trading week. We'll see you on Sunday. Bye for now.